Welcome to the Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life podcast. I'm your host, Nadia De La Cruz, founder of the Wayne Dyer Wisdom Community on Facebook and angeltarot.org. This podcast would not be possible without support from loyal fans like you. I want to thank everyone who has joined me on Patreon. You can sign up now for exclusive bonuses, including access to the full video for this episode. You'll find that link and more details about this podcast at nadiadelacruz.com. Now, my guest today is a writer whose work has appeared in the New York Times, Washington Post, New York Daily News, Wall Street Journal, and many other impressive publications. She is the author of a brand new book called Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing: Healing, Chilling, and Living with the Tao Te Ching. Here to talk about how ancient philosophy can help us thrive in modern chaos. Jessie Asya Kanzer, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Jessie, welcome back. So this is actually your second time on the Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life podcast. We got together in the fall of 2020, right after I'd recorded an episode titled Miraculous Healing. I was talking about many of the spiritual healing experiences that Wayne Dyer had and beliefs that he had surrounding that. And one of the things that came up was John of God. Now, I found your article, I think it was on HuffPost.
Yes.
Talking about your experience of having visited John of God and now all the controversy surrounding him now. So that episode, I think, was a little bit unusual. We kind of went in a different direction, but I didn't want to just sweep that under the rug. And in my mind, you were just the perfect person to talk about spiritual healing and this experience without, shame or embarrassment or feeling like we have to sweep everything under the rug. Like, let's take it for what it is and, mine it for the meaning. So thank you for coming on and talking to me.
Thank you. And, as I was saying to you before we got started, it is such an amazing opportunity to come back to where I started. It was actually my first podcast episode ever was with you. I've done many since then because as I'm promoting Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing, it's part of what we do now as writers and creators. We get to talk to each other. But what you said means a lot to me because everything I do in my writing and I did in this book is about unloading our shame and just being really honest about our journeys. Because as you and I agree, the journey's never over. So yeah, we're on it. And yeah, sometimes it's not perfect and mistakes happen and you end up following people who disappoint you. And so be it. That is the path of being human, right? And I'm really on a mission to help folks unload the shame of everything. That's why I try to be as open a book as I can. And in Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing, I talk about my eating disorder of many years and my love addiction and like any humiliating subject you could think of. Whatever happened to me that I used to myself sweep under the rug, I now bring out into the light because first of all, the truth sets me free, but also my hope is in seeing that I can be okay with all of this less than perfect stuff out about me, maybe folks will be more comfortable with their own imperfections and their own imperfect path.
Yeah, humanity is beautifully imperfect, perfectly imperfect. And I think that what is the most personal is often also the most universal. So when we bare our souls, when we show people our wounds, when we admit to our struggles, that's when we can really connect on a heart level with one another. And you've definitely done that with this book and really with the writing that you've been doing for years. So I'm honored that I was able to sort of cross your path at that point. And I know when we talked in 2020, you said, I'm writing this book about the Tao. And I was like, fabulous. Like, let me know when you finish the book. I'd love to have you back on. And here we are. Congratulations. You did it. So how long were you working on your book?
So about 3 years, but to be honest, when I said that to you, I remember telling you that, but until it actually happened, I never knew for sure it was going to happen. And I think it's
everything's that way, right? Nothing's certain
totally
in life, but we feel drawn towards things. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to note that because we got to get started before there's any certainty involved. And that's what I've really understood with this path as a whole. I've been doing something in these last bunch of years, and I was definitely on that path already when we first spoke, of just following the breadcrumbs of life. And the Tao is very much about going with life instead of going against it. And of course, we may hear that, but for me, it took many iterations, many years to fully understand it. And then from understanding to actually living it, to just follow the flow of life and let life lead me instead of taking over. So if I feel a strong pull towards something, I do it. And I don't get attached to how it's going to look in the end. And this book, Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing, has been a really beautiful progression of, of an idea that began, interestingly enough, with Wayne Dyer. And that's why I love that the first podcast I ever did was with you when we were talking, and I know that
with the same name as his book too, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your
Life, right? That's
but
exactly.
Yeah. His subtitle is Living the Wisdom of the Tao, but it's Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. And
that was the book.
Inspired this podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, and isn't that funny? That inspired this podcast, and that inspired Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing. So the synchronicity of that,
yeah,
it is just amazing.
There's
Yeah. And of course, we both go beyond just the inspiration that started it, but it is really cool how one seedling of an idea, one set of, wise words can spawn many different iterations, like your podcast, like your community, like my book.
Yeah, at the same time that we're the protagonist in our own life, we're also a player in a much bigger picture. So this is the book here, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao that we're talking about here. And that's actually what he was talking about when I went and saw him in Maui. I think that was 2007. And that was such a big moment for me. It was a transformative weekend, getting to spend that time on that beautiful island. So what was your response to this book, or what was the impact that it had on you?
So I'll quickly lift my book up because it's so funny that you had. So this is Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing, because now the finished copies are in. And
Yay.
It's funny that until you lifted Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, I didn't even realize that, there's a sky behind Wayne, and there's a sky here, and it's funny that there's
spaciousness.
I have just
yeah.
Yes, I have a cartoon character of a girl that I suppose could be me or could be anyone, but it's interesting. It's interesting to see. Again, more synchronicity. So I actually discovered the Tao Te Ching. The first time I ever heard of it was in a book called A Million Little Pieces. And many years later, I was already working on this book. I was listening to an old recording of Wayne Dyer's, and apparently that too is how he started his path with the Tao Te Ching. Yeah. Now, this book, A Million Little Pieces, was a book of addiction and recovery by one individual, and it had a really fraught life of its own, this book, because what happened was it was presented as a memoir, and then it ended up, there was some fictionalized stuff in there, and it had a lot of chaos around it. But for me, and I guess for Wayne Dyer, what it was a beginning of a different path altogether. I happen to have loved the book, but I'm a big reader. I like a lot of books. What I really took notice of were these verses of the Tao Te Ching. So then I started researching, I got the little copy of Stephen Mitchell's translation
that's
of
one of my favorites
the Tao.
Too.
Yes, mine as well as the pocket sized. It's like the perfect thing to always throw in your bag and have with you.
Yeah, Stephen Mitchell's translation is really easy to just digest and process, and I know there's so many copies. Isn't it like the most published book other than the Bible, something like that?
It's the second most translated after the Bible.
There we go.
And what's so funny? A lot of people don't really know about it here where we are. And it's interesting, obviously, to be the second most translated it's lived a long life, let's just say. 6th
Yeah.
century BC is when it's from. And what what I found is then I started reading as many books as I can about the Tao. And this was, 20 years ago. I was struggling with an eating disorder at the time. I was deeply depressed. And that's when I found Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. And I loved it. I always loved Wayne's writing, but I loved the way he brought those pieces to life, those verses from the Tao, these ancient kind of ideas to life. And so years later, as a writer, and I was writing these personal essays like the one about my experience with John of God, and I was deeply personal in my essays, but there was something inside me that yearned to go further. What I realized is, okay, I'm writing about myself, and that's cool, but what I want to show folks is how my life taught me lessons that I'm sure are very similar to the lessons their life taught or is teaching them. And as I say in the introduction to Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing, the stories are mine, but the struggle is universal. And it's what you said before. It's individual and yet it's universal. Pain is pain. We all experience it, and what we do with it is what really counts. And so years later, when I was thinking of what can I do with all of this personal writing I'm doing, which I loved, it was healing for me, what can I do? And at the same time, I was still having Stephen Mitchell's copy of the Tao next to my bed, looking at it nightly. And then I realized I can do what Wayne Dyer did. I can do a version of, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, where I take these verses, my favorite verses. I didn't include all 81 verses of the Tao. I took my favorite verses and I spoke about their lessons as they appeared in my life and in the world around me. And so really, yeah, you could say the book affected me a lot since it eventually was the seedling of an idea that led to my first book. So,
Well done. Well done.
thank
It's
you.
been quite a
Thank you.
journey. And actually, I really enjoy your writing style. That's how we connected in the first place, because I had seen your articles and it was, it's like talking to a friend, and you're just, like really just honest and authentic and just approachable. And the book reads that way as well. So,
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for saying that.
Oh, you're welcome. One of my favorite pieces of the book is, other than the many stories of your life that you weave in, which makes it really personal, is those little quick takes that you put on the verses. So I think there's 47 verses that you included, and you'll have like just a little snippet of, a no nonsense take on it. For example, verse 16, you wrote, "External life can be a crapshoot, but your inner life, it's all yours. Seek out the light even in the darkest of places, and peace even in the most turbulent of times. We all return to source either way."
That's what I wrote. I'm just looking at, what's so funny, and I know that as a creator, you can relate to this. Sometimes wisdom comes through us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not really ours. It just if we're good about getting out of our own way, we become channels. And that's why my own book is useful to me, because I need these reminders in my human form.
Oh, we all do, because we go up and down and we get distracted, and you can be on like a great meditation practice, and then later in the day you're like, snapping at the kids and the dishes are everywhere, and you could just really pull you out of that. Yeah, Wayne used to say, God builds all the bridges and writes all the books. And I think that at this deeper level, at this spiritual level, we really are all one. We really are all one. And so whatever you go through or whatever I go through and whatever experiences we have, it's like they're collectively benefiting all of us on a deeper level. And so I think we do our best work, whatever it is, whether it's playing tennis, whether it's singing or writing or showing up on a podcast. We do our best work when we can open and be that hollow bone and let it through. So I mean, that is honestly my prayer. Every time I show up, like I want to open to spirit, open those doors and just let it through. And you're right, sometimes I'll go back to things that I said or wrote. I'm like, wow, I really need that, you know? And I
Yeah.
think that's not a coincidence. What comes through us is what we need, which brings me back to Wayne, because I think, gosh, he had over 40 books and he put so much wisdom.
Mm.
You'd think he would just be like the smartest person on the planet. But I think the secret is he was writing what he needed, you know, and he was bringing that through for us. So I think he was benefiting from it as well.
Well, I can just say from the personal experience, and yes, this is my first book, of writing a book that with the intention of spreading the healing information that helped me. Well, guess what? I really healed myself in writing it. And I didn't realize that. I really had the intention of putting forth what I thought would be good for the world, whoever the
Mm-hmm.
world is, whoever picked it up, even if it's two people, it's irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you really have to just think, like you said, we're all one. So we all
Mm-hmm.
benefit from it. But what was so interesting to me is how healing the experience of putting down what I'd learned was for me personally. And then I love this quote, you teach what you need to learn. I really
Yeah,
do believe that.
that's beautiful. You know, you learn something best when you try to teach it to somebody else, because then you really have to understand it. But yeah, it's all a process. If you're doing it for you, you know, I just feel like that's the secret, you know, because you're detaching from outcome and you're like, what am I going to gain from this journey? So what did you gain from the journey of writing the book? And now you're showing up on podcasts and you're sharing information. I see you on social media every day. And I wonder sometimes, because it's so easy to get caught in the busyness, that do you come back to these teachings to help center you while you're, you know, doing the work?
Yeah, yeah, it's really ironic, right? Like to promote a book called Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing, I got to do a lot. And
Yeah,
that is
a
the truth.
lot.
Yeah. And you know what I didn't realize is I knew like the writing has been very healing, the writing itself, but what I didn't realize I had these busy people in mind when I was writing it, like people need this, people don't stop, and then I became one of these people. And you know what I'm most proud of is that I do come back to this
Mm-hmm.
and that I do not glorify busyness and I do not glorify, oh my God, I'm so busy right now. And I know that for me, there's an end point to this level of busyness. You know, once the book
Mm-hmm.
comes out, sure, I'll
It's a
keep doing the work and
season.
I don't, right, exactly. And you know, the Tao says there's a time for being exhausted and there's a time for being vigorous. I switch those two around. A time for being vigorous, a time for being exhausted. Like just know that whatever level you're operating at right now is good for right now. And if it's
Mm-hmm.
not good, change it. But it's temporary. So for me, yes, I come back to these teachings myself, to the teachings of do nothing, of taking these moments of stillness. And I also look forward to the quietude that will follow. And what's funny is I think that a lot of people get high on the attention of whatever it is that they're doing, on the busyness. It is so important to seek balance, to know that after that level of busyness has to come a level, has to come a period of quietude. You can't exist in one high perpetually without, falling. So
Yeah.
I'm learning that and I'm experiencing a lot of these teachings now, which is cool.
It's definitely a balancing act. Life always is. It's never static. And I have spoken with a lot of people who get really anxious when that slowdown starts happening, or they start feeling that need to retreat and they're like, "No, no, no, I need to keep going, I need to keep doing." But I visualize it like a wave, which is perfect for the Tao because they say be like water, right? But of that the wave comes in and the wave goes back out again. And if every time the wave retreats, you go, "Oh, no, 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 I'm losing it.
Yeah.
Come back," right? You would drive
Yeah.
yourself crazy when really, if you just wait, it's coming back again. It's just a cycle. It just repeats.
Yeah, and you need the reprieve in the middle. You do because you don't want to burn out. I'm only 40. I have a lot of life to live. I don't want to just be like burn myself out. And then the other thing is in the past, a lot of times I didn't see through the projects that I had in mind because I was so scared of the amount of work ahead. So it would be on the other side. Like I was so scared of I knew how big an undertaking a book was, for example.
For
But
sure.
what I've learned in doing this is anything you do, no matter the size of the undertaking, is always done one step at a time. And it's always done one moment at a time. And so it helps to know that this is what I have for today. This is what I have for tomorrow. And right now, when it's busy and there's a lot of work, that's what it is. And later, when the wave subsides, it's going to be different. And that's cool. That's good.
Yeah. Take it one day at a time, and not get so lost in our thoughts about what's coming up next or what's happened before, and then you miss it, right? And you go, wait, what did I do all day? I don't even know.
Yeah. And then, that's actually a fear of mine, as, in a positive way, because we all try to not live from fear, but this kind of like this understanding, I'll reframe it, this understanding that I don't want to get to the end of my life and feel like it all passed me by. But I got to remind myself of that daily.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really easy to get busy in the doing, especially with our culture, our Western culture of, getting things done and accomplishing and succeeding and independence and fame and everything else. And even now, especially with how social media has grown, and it's a beautiful thing and a terrible thing, like so many, like it's really easy to get caught up in that pressure of more followers and more likes. And this is something that I've brought up before, because I mean, let's face it, we're on social media. So like, I understand it. I feel like I actively work against what the platform is trying to encourage me to do. Like I get notifications every single day of, oh, you need to boost this post, and like, here's how you can get more likes. And I'm like, maybe I don't want more likes. Like, I don't want I don't want what I'm sharing to be based on what's going to get the most exposure, because then it's just going to be the most salacious, or like,
what a good point. What a good point.
That's not what I want to put out there. Yeah. And so I know I'm certain deal with that every day too. We have to make conscious choices, because it can be an amazing way to show up authentically like you are and connect. And it can also be a real slippery slope of like changing ourselves and our content to fit what we think other people are going to want.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And absolutely, I have to check myself all the time to make sure I'm putting out what I want to put out. But that being said, I have been using advertising. Well, my publisher uses it, to
there's a
promote
place
the
for
book.
It for certain.
Yeah, and I will absolutely be taking a break. Let's just say that. What happens is, what's interesting, as we grow, there are people that you see benefiting from the post, and it's hard to step away, but that's an ego thing too. Like, like they'll find it. If I take a break, they'll find it elsewhere. It's okay. But the balance with social media, to me, is a practice on mindfulness. And the more I practice it everywhere in my life, the better it gets in like this, in wherever I am right now. So right now I am active on social media in the period of time with the book coming out. And there's also so many different options for content, because I'm on a podcast, and I can read from my book, and I can do this. And I don't remember that. I don't think I've ever put out more than one thing a day. Maybe it's happened like here or there, but I'm not a machine. I'm not a robot.
Yeah.
And
Resist
that's not my game. Yeah, that's not my game either. And I think, let's say, I think sometimes I like to fantasize, like, if I get so big that somebody else does my social media for me. And then I said to myself,
I hear you.
Yep. But then I think, well, even if someone disseminates some information for me, I am not interested in becoming a conveyor belt of content. I think that it's important to decide what you want for yourself. That's not what I want. So one post a day it is. And sure, the same post can go on Instagram and Facebook and whatever, but like, it's very important to set up boundaries for ourselves, because otherwise I feel like it's just another capitalist machine. That's what I think.
It is. Yeah, pumping profit out. And the point of life isn't just to keep speeding up and going faster. And there is a pressure there for that. So you have to be kind of rebellious, I think, to put up boundaries and be like, all right, I'm going to show up, every day this month because I just finished my book. And if I don't tell people, they won't know. So how are they going to receive it, right? You have to get the message out there. But then next month, I'm going to take a couple weeks and I'm going to, go to the spa, or I'm going to go to the beach or whatever. There's a balance. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. And Nadia, the truth is, please, right? And then with the kids also, between the kids and the social media, we all need a spa day. But the truth is this. When you really put yourself in the present and you're doing what's needed from you right now, right this moment, well, guess what? You naturally get tired. And it is not a fear of I'm going to disappear. It's like, yeah, I'm going to disappear. Like, it feels good. Like, it's been a long process of writing. And then, I had to find an agent and all this. And I have other book ideas. I want to keep going. But right now, I'm like this, like, complete, I have a glare in front of me of the palm trees in the distance, and I'm
the light at the end of the tunnel, because you're birthing something, right? It's hard.
Exactly.
It's hard to push all that through. Which brings me to, of course, motherhood, right? You mentioned that you're a mom. I'm a mom too. So my kids are 5 and 8. Are your kids a similar age to that?
5 and 7. 5 and 7, and also
okay,
girls.
Almost the same.
Yeah.
So you have 2 girls. I have a girl and a boy. And oh my gosh, they are my whole world. And it can be, okay, they do 2 things to me. I'm going to say with me. They do 2
Only
things
2.
with me. They have this impact. 2 polarizing things. One is they bring me into the present moment. Like my daughter was like, she's 5, right? She's like, I know one song, all the words from beginning to end. Do you want me to sing it? And I was like, yes. And it was the sweetest thing. And she's singing in this soft little voice. And it's this Moana song about the ocean. And like, I just wanted to cry. Like, it was so beautiful. And it just brought me right into the moment. It just brought me right here, right now. Or my kids will be like, oh, let's do this. Or they'll be laughing about something. They remind me to be silly. But then also, right? They bring the chaos and the noise and the I need this and all of that. So it's like they bring me into the moment, but they also sometimes make me feel like I need to escape the moment.
Yes. I mean, and this is something I write about, as you know, and don't just sit there, do nothing, because I think the Tao is so applicable to parenthood. It talks constantly about the paradoxes of life, the duality, right? Like, for example, the beauty of putting out a book and the hardship. Do I keep coming back to the hardship? Because I'm like, I really want a vacation. That's the same thing with the kids. Like, sometimes I feel that you love them more than anything in the world, as you said, and you want to break from them. And the second you get a break, all you do is talk about them. So it's really this like existence of, you can't be without them, really. I mean, when you're like full in as a mom, we can dream, of course, of like a night away in the hotel, whatever. But the funniest thing is the second you're away, enough time passes and what are you talking about? What are you missing? It's your kids. It's really funny. It's that water analogy again that you were talking about. It's you're in the, and actually very like a book in that way. I mean, or any big project, like you're so into it and you're having so much fun and you're so present with them, and then you're so exhausted, but they're still there for quite a period of time before, you get your break. Like it's ebbs and flows. And I think that I love that you said that second part, because I think we're so comfortable talking about our love for our kids because
that makes us look like the good mom, right? Oh, I'm putting on the front. Like, it's nothing.
Well, and it's also
joy.
Right. And like, look, it's the image that we see in society, the image we're supposed to be, of course, but also it's what we actually feel. It's our greatest joy. It's, it has no strings attached like other things in our lives. But I love also talking about that other part, that level of exhaustion where you're like, I don't know if you find this doing this with your kids, but sometimes I'm like, shh. Like I'm just trying to bring their level of energy and volume down. And
There's
yeah,
no
I tell
volume
them sometimes.
control. It
No,
just goes up, up,
it
up.
just goes the excitement. And it's so funny because I'm a loud person myself, but like their level of energy. I said to my 7-year-old, I'm like, guys, how are you not tired? You're up, their bus picks them up at 7:40. It's like you're on all day. Why are you not more tired? I am so
Hmm.
tired. And she
Hmm.
said to me, "Oh, mommy, that's because grown-ups are always much more tired than kids. They just lose energy as they get older." And she just brought my own knowledge back to me. It's like, it is so
I
true.
think we
It is
make
so true.
ourselves tired with our thoughts too. Like, first of all, it's this mental load of all these responsibilities of the house and the day and the kids. And are their shoes still fitting? What are we going to have for dinner tomorrow? Oh my gosh, we need to get the heater fixed. Like, all of these things I think we carry in our mind. And actually, even from a caloric standpoint, our brains burn a lot of energy. So maybe there's something to that because we have things running in our mind all the time that I'm sure make us tired. But
You're right.
when my
I was
kids
just
were
gonna say you're so
babies,
right.
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. See, this is what this I have not. No matter how many podcasts I go on, I will still always want to talk when the other person's talking. I always get into this one moment where that happens, and that's just my chatty Cathy level. um, so yeah, then I complain that my girls talk a lot, but it's genes.
Yeah.
But, like when they're going to sleep, they can't stop telling their stories, and
Hmm.
so yes, I think you're so right that because if you look at them, they're so much lighter. Their energy is so much lighter. It's
Yeah.
not. It's in the present, and it's really like, and they may be talking about their day at school, but it doesn't really go much further than that. It's
Hmm.
it's really it's the lighter energy. Maybe the lighter energy allows them to be energetic for longer periods of
They're
time.
more playful. They're existing in the moment in a different way. They're not clinging on to things so much. I remember being a kid and looking up at these adults around me, and I feel like they were always going, "Oh, I'm so tired. I'm so tired." And I was like, "Well, why don't you just go to sleep?" Right? Because I couldn't understand at that age a sort of tiredness that was pervasive. The only sort of tiredness I knew was like, "Oh, I've been running around outside for an hour. I'm tired. I'm going to rest and then I'll be 100% again." And it wasn't until I became an adult that it was a different level. But what I was going to say about the babies is that especially when my kids were babies, I had this sense of, "Oh my gosh, I wish I had more time." I wanted time to clean the house. I wanted time to have a cup of coffee without anybody bumping me or nursing on me or needing anything. I wanted time to do my crafts. I wanted all these things. But then I realized that most of these activities that I wanted to do were centered around things for the kids. So if I didn't have the kids, I wouldn't be doing those things anyway. It's like they were my motivation, my purpose, my meaning. But they also take all of that time and that energy. But by the time they're grown and they're out of the house, I won't have, baby sweaters to knit and messes to clean up, and I'll be having plenty of quiet cups of tea or whatever. That it would be a different experience. It's like the thing that I was trying to get some space from is the thing that was motivating me to want to do those things in the first place. So there's a paradox. You can't separate one from the other.
Yeah, and it's so funny. I always think you can have everything, just not at the same time. You really can in life. I realize that now. But it's funny how we want time for ourselves when they're little, and there are periods when they are really needy, right? Like when they're babies and they need you all the
Mhm.
time, and so we just want them asleep, so that we have time to ourselves. And then, I mean, I would give thousands of dollars to have one day right now with my kids as babies again, because that time is gone forever.
Yeah.
And I write about that, and I still tear up when I read that section. That one, I mean, it's going to be an instant time. It's going to be like, it's going to be a decade, and also an instant, a moment, and then they're going to leave.
Hmm.
And the rest of our lives, we're going to be reminiscing and dreaming about the time that they were,
Yeah.
our hours, really hours. And
Yeah.
isn't that funny? It's so funny. It
And
colors
I
our
hear that.
entire life.
I hear that a lot, and to be honest, I live with a hyper awareness of the fact that time is passing and my kids are growing up. I remember tearing up when my son was like 3 months old and I was crying about him like growing up and going off to college. And my husband is laughing at me because here I am holding this baby. It's like he cannot even walk yet. Like, you have some time, you know?
Yeah.
But I've
Yeah.
been hearing this my whole life, and I knew I wanted to be a mom. So when I had my babies, it's like I wanted to hit the brakes. This is where I
Yeah.
want to be. This is it, you know? So like
Yeah.
for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to get anywhere else. And 8 years later, I still feel that way. And so that kind of hyper awareness of time is passing, this is precious. I love them so much. They change so quickly. It's going to be different next week, next month, next year. Produces so much anxiety and emotion and fear
Totally.
that can
Totally.
actually get in the way of our enjoyment of life. And I think maybe that's something a lot of mothers experience but don't necessarily talk
Yeah.
about.
Well, if I'm completely honest, I used to hear that a lot too. And I didn't believe it. Like, I believed it, I got it, but I would roll my eyes almost a little bit.
Yeah,
I'd be like,
like,
oh, it
yeah,
goes so
yeah.
fast, enjoy it.
Here, you hold
You know,
them.
remember like they would say, yeah, yeah. And I would just, I love, well, I also dealt with postpartum depression. I think it was a hard start for me, to be honest. And then I had them close together, and it was so hard because they're less than 2 years apart. My kids, it was so hard. And, you know, at night it would just be like a relief when I could get them to sleep. But it was such a beautiful time too. And it's almost like, when I think about it now, I'm like, yeah, it passed fast because it was so freaking hard. And that's the truth. And like, there's nothing I could say, like, I wish I could go back. But the truth is, the only way to get through it was in this like puff of a moment. And that's okay. That's how it was. And now they're becoming people and you get to watch them. So I see what I really, really feel what you're saying, because I'm that way too. But lately, I've been good about not letting myself get into the nostalgia.
Yeah.
Because I had this realization that, well, if I had like them back to babies, then I wouldn't have them as who they are now. And they just keep getting
Exactly.
more interesting and more multi-layered.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? You're building, right? Like this whole relationship with them that has been so many different facets and moments. And it's, no, you can't turn time backwards. That's true. And you know, you'll never be super young again and whatever else. But there's such a beauty in that. I see beauty in the building of life as we get older. And this is very new to me. I turned 40, so maybe it was something with the 40, the turning 40. But like, I feel like I feel much more settled than I ever have before in my life.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that the writing of my book did that for me.
Yeah.
Because I kind of gathered all of my lessons, and I get that now. I'm like, every moment is a new moment, and it's richer than the last. That's how I'm experiencing it. And you know, is it 100% true? Who cares? It makes me feel better. So
Yeah,
you know.
if we were to turn back the clock and go back in time, like, I would love to hold my baby for like an hour, but I wouldn't want to stay
Yeah.
there, and I wouldn't want to go
Yeah.
through that whole journey again. That if my 8-year-old was an infant again, it would actually be really sad. It would be sad
Yeah.
because I wouldn't be able to have the kinds of conversations that we have now and interact in the way that we do now. He's more of himself today than he was as a baby, and that's really exciting. Ram Dass
Or maybe
has helped.
I was gonna say, or maybe like we were on different like energy levels. Like babies, I'm sure they have their soul and all that, but we're like in this human life, and they're still somewhere in between, and we don't really communicate with them the way we
Yeah.
can as when we're all talking and walking and thinking.
Yeah, it's significant when they start to grow up and you're interacting with them as people. But this sense of attachment to the present moment is or to the past is something that Ram Dass really helped me with, because he talked about he was a traveling sadhu, right? He would travel all around and speak to people, and you know, I think he had was it a bus? he used to travel around in. It was like a Volkswagen van. I think that's what it was. And he
Like
lived
a
in there.
decorated one. Yeah.
Yeah, a nice one. And he would do his
Yeah.
meditation, and I have a photo of him of that. I love that. But he said that he tried to get rid of everything, right? This let go of everything, release attachment. So he tried to get rid of all of his stuff. And one day he dumped like almost all of his boxes into the trash. And then he says in the middle of the night, he's up in the dumpster digging out stuff that he realized he just couldn't live without, right? And so he said he had 19 boxes and he got it down to like 9, right? He got it down to like 9 boxes he just dragged around the country with him. And then, it builds up a little bit. He's like, now I have like 12, right? But it's like, it's so hard to let go of these things. But he says that the motivation that's behind that is this sense that we're going to run out of the present moment, that what is, that it's never going to be as good as it is now. And so I really, really hope that I'm not in my 60s and 70s going, oh my gosh, I wish my babies were young again. Life was so wonderful when we were young. Because I feel like that's the same mistake as thinking life is as being in your 20s and thinking, oh, when I get that career or I get that husband or whatever my life is. It's the same mistake of not
Totally.
looking at where you are. And so I'm committing to it now. I'm not going to be that person who goes back and says,
too.
"Oh yeah, let's do it. My life was so great when, and oh, you're going to miss it." I'm never going to tell anybody, "Oh, you're going to miss it. Enjoy it now," because I want to milk every moment for all that it's got. I want to enjoy that present moment. And so far, if I'm honest, it just gets richer every day. Now, life is not without challenges and setbacks and doubts and emotions, but when I think about where I am now, how I feel in my body and my life in this moment, it is so rich. Like, how could I long for anything else? Even when I start to get nostalgic about the baby days, I look at my kids now and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Look at what we could do today, and let's do it.
I think that can I clap? That is the way to live. I mean, and the truth is, when I even think about like going back to when the kids were little or going back to anything else, like going back to the time when I had more time and rest and whatever. Well, here's the catch. I would only want to go back as myself now because I am a better me now. Like I could really enjoy my baby if I go back now. Back then I was scared, I was a mess, whatever. But like it's interesting, like I would not at all, yes, I wouldn't give up them as they are now, but I wouldn't want to give up myself because I'm better. I have gotten better with time, and I would definitely not want to go back to my 20s because I was a mess. And then when I think back, like, sure, teenager, but also just as myself now, not as then, those confused people. So yeah, I hope it's in our 60s we're that much wiser, that much, and really the wiser you get, the lighter you get, the happier and more joyful you get. So bring it on, right?
I feel like that's how Louise Hay was. She wasn't going, oh, it was so great when I used to be a model and look at me in the 80s and oh, you're going to miss it. No, she was like, life is beautiful. This is wonderful. And she enjoyed what she had in the present moment. I will do that as well. And I am doing it right now. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for where I'm at. We've grown a lot.
And we will do it. We will do it. And maybe by then your podcast will be like one of those virtual machines where you holograph each other. Who knows where we'll be, right? Technology is moving so fast. We don't know where it will take us. That scares me sometimes, by the way. Like, yes, I'm not scared of time moving. I'm excited, but I get scared at the speed we've begun to live at as humans, as a human race. That scares me sometimes.
Yeah, I feel like simplicity adds a lot. And it doesn't mean that you have to give up and live off the grid. You don't have to give up your phone and your computer and everything else because you could do these are amazing tools, but they really are tools. And I think we have to be really intentional with how we use them, with what notifications we allow to come through, with when we sit down and check our emails and all of those things that we can see. This was always true, but we can see it more than ever that we're in charge of what comes into our space, and everything that comes in impacts how we feel.
I couldn't agree with you more. And that's one of these things that during this time of being more busy and doing interviews and whatnot, I've become way more attached to my devices, to my phone and checking my email and whatever. And I see it. Like I can see, I say that awareness is a superpower, but it's also, it's a magnifying glass. Like I see myself. I get that I'm not in the best place right now. And that's why I really do look forward to that break. The great thing is when you become aware, you don't let yourself get too out of hand. We're able now, another beauty of getting older and having experience, we're able to bring ourselves back in, rein ourselves in. And it's interesting because I feel like the kids are seeing it more. For us, it was like a new toy that appeared and then it grew so fast. The children, they've always had this, and I used to be scared, like, oh, they're going to be addicted, but they see it because they see how it takes their parents away sometimes, and they when I'm being bad, like where I'm like I have 50 emails and we had the pandemic and the kids were home much more, and my daughter would say, oh, you're a phone person, because she knows how I feel about phone people. And she said the other day, she's like, we should have at least one day a year, like where it's a holiday and everybody has to not be near any of their devices. No phones, no computers. And I'm like, that sounds like the best. I think yes, we need that. You're right.
Yeah. So not once a year, but more often than that.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think so what I'm saying is I think I used to be worried that the newer generations, like about kids and screen time, I think they will understand the perils of it too. Like they're not dumb. They're smarter than we think.
I think where they are the most vulnerable is socially. That they're in this environment where they're at an age where they're vulnerable, where they're wired to care more about what their peers think than anybody else. And now all of a sudden they find themselves on these forums where anybody and everybody can say terrible things to them and they can really take it to heart and they don't always know how to talk about it. So I think it's really important that with the young ones, right? Now our kids aren't quite there yet, but when they get there,
oh my God,
they'll get there. And I think that the best thing we can do is kind of expand our teachings and our understanding around social pressures and peer pressure and, being secure in who you are and making your own choices and not trying to please everybody else are really going to serve them going forward because the technology is second nature to them. It's the social stuff that I think is really detrimental when they're in their adolescence.
Very good point. And my hope is it's not regulated quite as much as it should be, and not anywhere near there, actually, let's be honest. And I hope that we catch up with that as a government, as a people. I don't even blame anyone that it's not as regulated as it should be because it's new, and I get it. Like it was new, but now that we know how harmful it is, we gotta evolve. And so I think that will happen too, I hope. But I gotta say, when it does scare me because when I think about myself as a teenager and my insecurities and, I developed an eating disorder. I'm pretty short normally, like short height wise, not that I don't, it's fine, but I'm like somewhere 5'2", like that. And that's one of those things that bothered me when I was younger. And I lived in these 6-inch heels and I was very vulnerable to peer pressure. So I just feel like if I was a teenager at this time, that same me, there would be I don't know, topless pictures of me around just on the internet.
All over Instagram.
Yeah, all over Instagram. Like that, the understanding of that is scary. So I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But that helps me enjoy right now more, realizing that those times as parents are yet to come.
Yeah, that's not for today. That's for another time. But yeah, and we go through this period of self-exploration, but to do that publicly, I'm so thankful my life was not on the internet when I was in high school because I wouldn't want it out there now. We go through a process and everybody
I
does.
hope, but it's interesting. It's something you have to teach them along the way because, They've already. My daughter was hanging out with her friend, and she's very young, but they think it's funny to take. Oh, I'll take a picture of my butt. So I already started this conversation of why you can't do that. Now I totally get it as a kid, just being funny. It's not. It's so innocent.
Yeah.
But then
But
I have
you got to
to
start that line of you got
Yeah.
to start that line of communication young because they're exposed to things that they don't understand and it normalizes it for them.
Right. And so then we start so young. And I thought, my God, it's too young to start this conversation of who can end up with your picture. But it's not too young, you know?
Yeah.
The reality, I try to do that now. I used to be kind of embarrassed of like being on Instagram in front of my child, right? Because I'm so scared of that for them. And so now we talk about it. I'm like, Mommy's book is coming out. So I have to do this thing for Instagram so people know about my book. So I try to show them the reality. Like, I can't hide. It would be like hiding the television set from kids at a certain age. You know, this is
That's
where
not going to work.
yeah, stuff's going on. So I try to figure it out. I guess we're all figuring it out together. And I thought about this. It's probably a more honest way to be with your kids. You know, I try to be really honest in all the stuff. I don't know. Because I wish my adults in my life didn't do that then.
Yeah.
I wish they did. I wish they were like, I don't know everything and I'm figuring it out.
Same.
Yeah, be nice.
Well, that's why we're doing it, right? Because
Yeah.
that wasn't really modeled and I believe in authenticity above positivity. I really do because I think positivity
good
can
way,
be
yeah.
toxic. And I, you know, from the earliest age, I have done my best to try to answer my kids' questions with as much, you know, as straightforward, as honest as I can, even when it's difficult and awkward. And I'm trying to have those conversations at an age appropriate level, but way before it was happening with me, including talking about death, you know?
Yes.
And
yes.
I didn't feel comfortable to maybe ask a lot of questions about that because it's uncomfortable for a lot of the adults. So I think that, you know, some of us are changing that, and our kids will have other things to overcome. Let's be honest. But that's that's one thing that's going to be different for them.
Yeah, like we're better in certain ways for sure. We know more. We understand that, you know, I have a chapter called On Death and Dying in here, and Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing. And it's about like, it was about when my 3-year-old at the time, some people died around us. My grandma, it was the pandemic, you know, our friends' grandparents died, and we had to start talking about it. And I realized how uncomfortable it made me that she was talking about dying and she was 3. And then I realized that nobody ever talked to me about it. Like literally, like it was just not explained. And it was just this terrible thing that we try to avoid, right? That's all we know about death. And so we also started talking about it. But it's funny because on Death and Dying, I ask people, I will share this, I ask in the little Do Your Tao section at the end, I ask people to go back to their first experience of death, the first time they learned about death. Can you even remember what it was like to understand, to know that death is something that happens? And if you can't remember it, which I couldn't remember the first, I mean, I remember the first time somebody died. I was 4. I remember the kind of pain around it. But I realized that in going back to it, I can go back to that kind of less than healthy understanding and maybe change it. So maybe say, you know, I'm a grown up now, so perhaps I didn't even look at my beliefs about death, and am I willing to change it? As spiritual people, we know death is not this thing that just happens and then you're gone. We know there's more. So why not change this understanding and talk to ourselves about death? And then once I was talking to myself about it, I was journaling about it, I was able to talk to my child. And our cat of many, many years recently passed away. And, you know, it was difficult for me because he was with me for 15 years, but it was really hard on the kids with whom they lived. You know, they lived with him since birth. And it was really healthy to have normal conversations. Maybe he'll be reborn as a lion. Maybe, you know, maybe he's somewhere like floating up in the sky with his mom or his brother. And then my 7-year-old goes, maybe he's just dead and there's nothing else. And I'm like, that's maybe, you know, we don't know. I don't think so. And I tell her, I don't think so. Here's why I don't think so. But I also, she's also allowed to be this dark person and have her beliefs. And you're right that you have to cross the line. Sometimes doing what's right and doing what's comfortable are different things.
And I think that I kind of take the same approach, and I'm okay with that ambiguity of, we don't know. That's a good question. Here's what I think, or I've heard this option, or, what do you think about it? And I believe that kids can handle a lot more than we give them credit for. As an example, my son I think he was 3 years old, and we got chickens. We got baby chicks. Now, anybody who's had baby chicks knows they don't always make it, right? So we had this little box of baby chicks, and we lost a couple of them. And this was the first time my son was maybe aware enough to understand death. And I was like, he's going to see this and freak out. Like, should I hurry up and get rid of the chick? Or like, do we get another one and replace it? Like, how do I have this conversation? And then when he found out, he was just like, oh, okay. And like he was fine. So I think a lot of it has to do with our comfort level and the emotions that it stirs up for us, which is why a lot of people don't ever want to talk about grief and death and dying. And that's another thing that Ram Dass, I think, shined a light on for me of looking at that differently. But yeah, it's a process. We're finding our way.
Yeah.
We don't have all the answers. I think that's okay. If we can have open dialogue with our kids, hopefully when they're grown, they're going to come back and talk to us. And maybe we can at least show them how we've done it when it comes to things like Instagram or spirituality or, balancing the busyness of life or motherhood, because they may not remember what we said, but they'll remember how we were. They'll remember how we lived our lives, and they'll probably model much of what they do based off of us. So, that's motivation, I think.
You're so right. And that's, I recently read Wayne Dyer's daughter's book, The Knowing. And Serena Dyer very graciously agreed to write a little blurb for my book, which she did.
Beautiful.
And yeah, it was really like I had to chase her down, I'll be honest. It was
She's a busy
it
lady.
wasn't easy. Of course. And she has how many kids? I think 3 kids. And it was not easy, but it was really beautiful what she wrote. And she said, for anyone looking to connect more to their higher self, I highly recommend reading this. And she wrote that my personal story is inspiring. It was really nice for me to hear that, because obviously if Wayne Dyer was alive, I would have tried to reach him, and who knows if I would have. But what I loved from learning from them is that they said, yeah, sure, like from having a spiritual parents, there were these great ideas that were part of their norm. But what's interesting is they didn't really realize those spiritual ideas fully until their father died.
Yeah.
And they needed that knowledge to get over the grief of that. And I thought, how beautiful. We think, we think we can teach our kids, and still the way they're going to learn is, maybe by having painful experiences and struggles of their own. And we can't, and isn't the pandemic such an example of that? Like, we don't know what it's like to grow up wearing masks in school, and our 5-year-old started school in such a weird environment, right, in kindergarten, and we don't know what effect that has on them and on their psyche. So I thought, here I am, I was an immigrant in the Soviet Union. I came to America. I lived this middle class life. They're going to have such a perfect childhood, and we don't even know what the world is like. So
yeah,
it's all a crapshoot.
There's been a bit of a grieving process, because I realized subconsciously I came into this with this picture in my mind of what my kid's childhood would be like, and similar in many ways to my own childhood. And at some point with this pandemic, I had to go, okay, their child isn't going to look the same, and that's okay. Like, we're going to find a new way through this. They're going to have different experiences. That doesn't make it bad, but each one of us has our own journey for sure. So they come into this world, with their own soul, with their own dharma. They don't come for us, they come through us. So it's a big job being a parent.
Yeah, and that's another Ram Dass teaching that I loved, as well. That he talked about it, and I love how actually that was a Rumi poem, right? Our children, they come from us, but they are not ours. He
Yeah.
wrote. Yeah, it's a beautiful way of looking, and I try to capture that as well, and don't just sit there do nothing with saying the same. It's the same kind of idea that what the Tao teaches us about parenting is that the greatest love in a way is letting go.
Mm-hmm.
Not we're not here to. We had these ideas of what their childhood would look like. We have ideas about them, and they will show us their own way, like it or not. We gotta let them be them.
Yeah. Let them spread their wings and try things out and make mistakes and have hard times, and just know, like, I'm going to be here for you as much as I can, but this is your journey. And you need to listen to that voice within. I want to listen to the voice within. You need to listen to your own voice within, even at the age of 5 and 8. If you give them the space to do that, they're self-directed.
And they'll tell you too. They'll be like, "Well, I'm not you." They'll say it.
They'll remind you if you forget.
Yeah. So funny.
Now, are there essential teachings of the Tao Te Ching? So there's 81 verses, and I know that
Yes.
it said that, some of them kind of contradict one another. It's that paradox.
Yeah.
Some of them are harder to understand, but are there some themes that kind of run through the teachings?
Yeah, I love how in one of the verses, Lao Tzu, who's said to have written the Tao Te Ching, now Lao Tzu translates as the old guy. So obviously that wasn't any one person, or the historians believe it's a mix of people. So anyway, it's not one specific person. We don't really know who, but the writer said, I really have 3 things to teach: simplicity, patience, compassion. And I see it as simplicity, which is why now is such a good time to look at the Tao again. Simplicity is so hard to find nowadays because we've gotten so over saturated with messaging and content and noise. And I read that today in a person's life, in one day, they consume more information than a couple hundred years ago someone did in their entire lifetime. That's how much information we have coming at us.
No wonder we're tired.
Right? So the art of simplifying our lives is really worth looking at. How can we simplify all our desires, all our plans, our many thoughts? How can we find moments of stillness and simplicity? Patience is the understanding that all change takes time. That's what's really important on a spiritual journey. The understanding that, you're never done. You never get there. You said it so beautifully at the beginning, because it's a journey, and that patience is very important. And then finally, compassion. When you begin with compassion towards yourself for your mistakes, imperfections, idiosyncrasies, whatnot, it's so easy to extend compassion to other people. But the Tao reminds us that compassion starts within.
Yeah. It's such an important reminder. We get so externally focused, but really, for one, life is mirroring what's happening internally. So our life is lived in our own minds. It's not what's happening, but it's our thoughts about what's happening, the emotions that those produce that we are experiencing. So 2 people can be in the same place at the same time, having a very different experience of life, but assuming this is just how it is, but it's all happening within you.
So true, because we bring the joy. We bring, change your thoughts, change your life. We bring the thoughts.
Yes. Thank you, Wayne. Now, in your epilogue, you wrote, even if you follow none of my suggestions, not a single one, you are doing the Tao. Even if you don't like much of what I've written here, you're doing it and doing it well, because there is no other way.
And I stand by that. the Tao, what I've understood, I spent this time, so I thought I was going to write this book. What I didn't realize is they wanted me to do my own translation. So I ended up sitting for every verse through a dozen or so translations, and I would look at this verse from this angle and this angle and this angle, and eventually just come back to the simpler I could see it, the more true it felt. And I had this understanding that that's all there is what you're living and what you're doing right now. And the judgment we put on it, oh, right now I'm really good and I'm living my life really good, like really well, and everything's perfect. I'm being a good person, whatever. Well, who says that person is more valuable than the person struggling and who is really suffering, who's really not understanding what's going on, or who maybe is hurting other people because they're suffering inside? Like, that experience is as valid as that experience. And so these are suggestions. My book are they're suggestions based on the Tao Te Ching for a simpler, more easeful life. And again, I don't think it's wrong if you don't use them. I don't think it's wrong if you don't choose to be easeful. And you know what? There are moments that I can't get to the easeful. There are days I can't. But this information is here if you want to find a more easeful way to live. It doesn't make you better, but it will make it more easeful for you. And that's, I'll be honest, it's more enjoyable. But still, the choice is yours, and not every day has to be perfect.
We can come back to that flow through life, right? And without shaming ourselves for, I can't believe I got distracted again and I got frustrated. And okay, just take a breath. Like, don't beat yourself up. Take a breath. Come back to where you are as often as you need, 100 times a day, right? And if you keep practicing that, you're going to find yourself in that state more often. And that's part of the human experience. We're not here to avoid suffering. We're here to grow and to learn and to experience a whole variety of things. And some of our darkest times, our hardest times, even collectively, like with this pandemic, are maybe providing us with the most growth. So be thankful even in times of struggle.
Yeah, change is not comfortable. Everyone who's birthed a baby knows. Birthing something new is not comfortable, and but the thing is, we're constantly birthing a new us, a new reality, a new society. Yeah, like, society's changing right now. You can feel it. Any one of us who's in the spiritual realm feels that there are changes, and changes are bumpy. They don't go smoothly often, especially when there's billions of people involved. So just ride it out. There's no other choice anyway.
So if you had one message that you wanted people to remember from this book, what would you say?
You are doing really, really well. That's the message I want people to take. I don't care what you're doing. If you're here and you're curious enough to pick up a book and to maybe consider, what is it all about? You're doing it well. I don't care if you're at the bottom and if you just robbed a liquor store, That's the truth.
Yeah. You're on your journey. You're having your process. We're all on a journey home, whether we take the long way or not. I think we all end up at the same place. So what's the best way for people to reach you and get a hold of your book?
JessieKanzer.com, JessieKanzer. And I know you're going to put it in the notes, but I figure if someone's driving, I don't know. JessieKanzer.com has all the information. I have a bunch of free events that I'm doing online and some not free events. Actually, I'm doing a benefit event at Omega because those centers really suffer during this time. And my own mentor, Laura Day, who's a teacher as well, just assembled a bunch of us teachers to teach for free and to collect that money to keep Omega open. So all of that information's on my website, and the book, Don't Just Sit There, Do Nothing, can be found on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and any indie bookstore as well. And all those order links are on my site as well. So that's why I say my site. I feel like, you can Google someone and find a billion things about them. I have a site completely for utilitarian reasons, because I realize, if folks want to get some of my information or see me on social media or get some freebies that I have, that's one place, and order the book, one place.
Get it all in one spot, jessiekanzer.com.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
congratulations again. Well done. It is a well-written, enjoyable book with your take on the Tao. I think people can get so much of this, and you really brought your humanity through, which is a beautiful thing because we're all going through this together. So thank you for the book. Thank you for spending this time with me, and good luck with the launch.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And for all our listeners, thank you for following Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life and telling your friends about it. The full video for this episode will be available exclusively on Patreon. You can get that link and more details about this podcast at nadiadelacruz.com. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other. Namaste.